Grandma, unbothered, looks at me and goes, "You know aliens landed on our local beach in the 70s. Butterflies won't leave me alone now that my older brother has passed away. We used to raise and make pets out of butterflies together. My brother and I were best friends growing up. He was 4 years older than me. He was my biggest role model. As a young boy, probably close to being 10 years old, he was absolutely fascinated by butterflies. He took care of them, loved raising them from cocoons. He knew everything about every butterfly. After they would pass away, he would keep them because he thought they were beautiful and loved them dearly. I partook in it merely because I admired my older brother so much and wanted to do everything he did because I thought he was the best. The butterflies never seemed to care for me much. They'd land on him like crazy but wouldn't land on me. Even when we would go to places like Butterfly World where they're used to humans, they would land on everyone except me. As he progressed into adulthood, he struggled with addiction, which ended up making him fall very ill and his body gave up on him. He had a heart attack the last time he used a substance, and he passed away. He still loved butterflies up until then, when he was 23. Although we weren't close at this chapter in our lives, as his addiction had really pushed me away, we still talked occasionally when he was going through his good days. The last time I saw him, a few weeks before he died, we were visiting our mom and had brought up ghosts, as we had both always thought her house was haunted. Growing up, him and I had many paranormal experiences, which we both saw together and talked about the last day I saw him. They were experiences that made us bond even more since no one else saw these things but us, together. While still being very young, we had moved into a rental for the month. We would play in the attic. We had been in there lots at this point, but one day went up there and it was filled with probably 10 monarch butterflies which we assumed came in through the slightly opened window. We both saw it and were in awe, played with them for a while, but by the next day they were gone. I don't remember us ever even telling our parents. It wasn't until I was much older and realized that was very strange. The visit I had with him before we passed, the topic of paranormal got shifted into reincarnation. He asked if humans could reincarnate into anything, like a butterfly. He wondered. It was a very brief moment, but now that he has passed, some strange things have been happening to me and I can't get the few seconds out of my brain where he mentioned reincarnating into a butterfly. He passed away in late January. It was still basically wintering where we live. Not soon after this, a bright orange butterfly was outside of my house. I thought it was so strange, and it, of course, didn't make it due to the cold. I didn't really give it a second thought, other than how weird it was that there was a butterfly in February. Ever since then, butterflies follow me everywhere. It's gotten to the point where it's very strange and even the people around me think it's strange. We are not in a very butterfly populated place, but they land on my head randomly as I'm walking to work now. They land on my leg when I'm not looking, as I'm sunbathing, and scare the living hell out of me. We went floating down a river in a different town, and halfway down the 3-hour river ride a butterfly landed on my arm, rested on the tube. The group of 15 we were with saw it and thought it was so bizarre, none of them could get it to come near them. This morning I got home from work and a very bright, new-looking butterfly was seated on my front step, seemingly unable to fly. It looks completely uninjured but wouldn't leave, so I fed it and gave it a nice sunny place to rest, and it still sat outside the door hours later, fluttering around but won't fly away. I can't help but feel somehow my brother is doing this, which is a lovely thought, but it makes me filled with so much sadness and grief, wishing I could tell him about all these butterflies. My mom saw La Llorona in Mexico when she was 15. Alright, so this story has been told to me by my mom a few times. And every single time I still get that creepy, eerie feeling that someone is watching me. My mom is from a small town in Mexico located in Zacatecas. When she was around 14, she had the habit of waking her mom up to go to the restroom since it was an older home and the restroom was located outside. My mom tells me that it was around 3 a.m. when she woke up and felt the need to use the restroom urgently. So she began calling out for her mom. After a while of her mom not responding, she began getting agitated and started screaming. At this point, my mom turns around and at the foot of her bed, she sees her mom standing there. She was wearing a white robe but had a very bleak expression on her face and both of her arms were extended. My mom said that she suddenly felt extremely cold and a huge sense of dread. She had never seen her mom wear a white robe. That's when she looked down and saw her mom's feet weren't touching the floor. At that moment she screamed and quickly threw the covers over her head. Her mom wearing something completely different runs in to find my mom shaking in her bed. Nobody believed my mom, everyone told her it was a dream. Until a few days later there was a power outage. During this my mom and a few of her siblings with her parents all decided to sleep in the living room. At around the same time at 3 a.m., they heard the same undeniable wails of La Llorona down their street. None of them slept that night. My grandma has something interesting to say about aliens. Today the Area 51 thing was on the news and my grandma, unbothered, looks at me and goes, "You know, aliens landed on our local beach in the 70s. They keep their ship hidden under the sand. That's why we haven't had a hurricane since." Now listen to y'all. My grandma is a very old school, a conservative, religious woman we don't even joke around with. When she said this I thought she was joking, but she just went back to watching the news like she hadn't said anything to me. For context, my aunt is one of my neighbors. Later when I went to check my mail I saw my aunt sitting on her lawn and went to tell her what my grandma said. Again, unbothered, my aunt goes, "Yes, that's true. That's why that part of the beach is sectioned off?" I was for sure some kind of elaborate prank was going. But later I saw another neighbor and told them the craziness and they agreed. I looked it up and there's a bunch of news stories of the town claiming that the reason major storms won't hit my area even though we are in a high-risk zone for hurricanes is because of the aliens protecting their ship. My grandmother with Alzheimer's did something weird 4 days before she died. The title explains it. My grandma suffered for 9 years with Alzheimer's before she passed. She lost any ability to speak, other than mumbling gibberish quietly, feed herself, or do much of anything around year 7. When she was moved to hospice, my mom and I visited her every day. 4 days before she died, my mother and I were sitting and talking to her. Out of nowhere, she began praying the Hail Mary and speaking perfectly. She said the whole prayer 3 times in a row before she stopped. That was the last time she ever spoke. It was really amazing to be there and I still can't believe it happened. May her soul rest in peace. Have you ever said something creepy as a kid that scared your parents? For me it was when I was 3 or 4 years old. I remember telling my aunt, through 3 or 4-year-old baby talk, that I was flying, some feet off the ground, and from above I saw my mom and dad in a restaurant through a window. I could also see my dad's black truck he owned when I was a kid parked right outside the restaurant. When all of a sudden 3 men with bats come up to the truck and start hitting it and my dad comes out and starts fighting them. My aunt said, "That's cool, sweetie," and went back to playing with my toys. It wasn't until years later when I was like 15 that my parents had a dinner party with some friends and they started to talk about paranormal stuff. My mom said Edgar scared us when he was younger. Then she proceeded to tell the story I told my aunt when I was a kid and finished saying nobody ever told Edgar this, sorry, and the thing is that it actually happened. The guy that beat his dad's truck was my ex-boyfriend who brought 2 of his buddies to beat both his dad's truck and his dad because the guy was still mad I broke up with him. But the really scary part is that Edgar wasn't even born yet when it happened and that was actually his dad and my first date. Thank you for watching Reddit Space. Please subscribe if you love these Reddit stories.